This podcast is sponsored by Tusk, an open source non-ICO crypto project powered by community. Check them out on the web at tusk.network. That's TUSC.network. The Rob McNealy program is the nexus of cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, and entrepreneurship. Now, welcome to the program. Hey folks, Rob McNealy here, and I am real excited to talk to you guys today because we have an amazing guest. Her name is Barbara Bickham, and she is an amazing woman. We met here probably about a month ago, and she is the managing partner of the Women's Innovation Fund Accelerator, also known as WIFAX. It's kind of a VC firm, and it focuses on women in tech. And this is one of the things that's real exciting. Barbara's also the founder and CTO of Trailyn Ventures, which is a blockchain consulting company. So I'd like to welcome you to the show. Barbara, how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Hey, you know what? I've had a lot of good conversations with you over the last couple of weeks, and I've said you need to come on the show because I think you have a perspective that I think a lot of people need to hear. And I really like what you're doing and where you're focusing on tech and bringing more women. And so let's take a step back and, tell me a little bit about your career and how you got into tech.
All right. Well, this is one of the two stories I think you'll ask me about. The second thing will be, how did I get into blockchain? So
no, I won't ask that.
You won't ask that one? That's a famous one as well.
Okay. Well, it's always, you always have to ask, how did you get into Bitcoin? And I never use that.
Not Bitcoin. How do I get into the blockchain space? That's
exactly.
A separate question. But how did I become a tech girl? So when I was in high school, I had a project, and it was to make an area of a circle, and it was in a computer science class. So my high school had computer science. I went to kind of a private Catholic school, and they had computer science there. And so the assignment was to make an area of a circle. And so I did that assignment, and I did it in like a week. And it was we had to print out a flow chart of how we would make the area of a circle. And I did it in Visual Basic. So this is like way back before any super fancy programming languages. So I did that, and I was like, well, this is kind of boring. I need to do more assignments. So what I decided to do was extend my flow chart and do area of a square, area of a rectangle, area of a triangle. Because you could say, which one do you want to do? And then you could kind of click and say, I want to do rectangle, number 4. And then it would do the flow chart and say, if it's a rectangle, then compute the, enter in the number. And then you entered in the number, and then it computed it. So that didn't take me too long, but that's kind of how I fell in love with computers. So then after that, I got into Berkeley. Still don't know how that happened. It's kind of a mystery, one of those life mysteries, because I didn't really apply. So I'm trying to figure out how that happened. Maybe that was just on their radar or something. That happens, I guess. And got in there, got my computer science degree. I have a bachelor's of arts. So it's interesting because at Berkeley, to get the bachelor's of science, you had to get into the engineering school. And then the engineering school make you take all that Chem E, EE, ME, physics. I didn't want to take all that. So I said, I just want to do my lovely computers. I don't need to have an engineering degree and a computer science degree. So I just took the CS part. So I went there, and then I got my first job. So after I got my first job, when I got it, they were like, hey, we want you to create this program out of nothing. Here's a blank paper. We want you to do this translating program, and we don't care how you write it. We just want you to do it. And I went, are you sure? Because I literally just graduated from school. I don't know. I don't really have any experience writing any code or doing this yet. They said, oh, no, you went to Berkeley. You figured it out. So that became one of their biggest products. It was called a stored geometry node. So what we did was we converted something from editor's page planner. This is prior to the fancy internet. You had to actually print out paper as like newspaper. The newspaper business is very different than it was back then. But this was one of the first computerized ways to actually print newspapers on the computer. So we had this ad makeup station, and then we had the ability to enter in stories. This thing kind of filled in the parts on the paper. If you saw like ads in the corner, it was just like, here's an ad, or you saw like a small story in the corner. It's like, here's like Joe's little commentary. That was what that particular software did. It helped find kind of where to fill in pieces of paper. So that was my first job. After that, I had a very traditional career, a lot of architecting and designing systems, a lot of managing people. And about 15 years into my career, I had an opportunity to start a company. So I started a company called TechGenai. What TechGenai was originally, this is like story of pivots. What TechGenai was originally, it was supposed to be the ability to do wireless roaming across multiple networks. So Wi-Fi network and cellular network, those were the two back in the day that you were going to roam across. So I figured out how to do that, and I did all these surveys. I did all this consumer asking and, you know, focus groups and things that you do now in the lean startup method. And what happened was people found out I was in the wireless business. I'm in LA and this is Hollywood. And I was talking to some of my entertainment friends and they said, hey, can you put that American Idol style voting and polling in my show? I went, yeah, I think I could do that. And I knew all the people. So I completely pivoted my company to do that. And TechGenai is actually one of the wireless pioneers in the United States. We kind of brought the wireless into mass adoption. So we helped a lot with short codes. So when you text help to 12345, that's partially my fault. QR codes, partially my fault. So I worked with a lot of the technology to kind of create the mass adoption. So that's what TechGenai was. During the time of running that company, I had somebody come to me and go, hey, I have an angel group. Would you like to run an angel group? And I said, well, yeah, that could be interesting. Let me do that too. So while I was running my company, TechGenai, I was also running this angel group. And so I ran an angel group called the PCN LA. And I had about 400 angels in there. And this was during 2008, 2007, 2008, 2009. Well, we all know what happened then. There were a few less angels in 2009. And my angels were very great because they said, you know what, Barb, we love you, but we're kind of a little less angel-y now, right now in this moment. So I was like, okay, so I shuttered that down. And then I also had this, but then I found an opportunity to work with a private merchant bank. That kind of shut down. And so then I went back to my coding roots. So I went to work for a European company. I was the lone American in the European company. So I had workers in Europe and workers in India. So I was the lone American. So that was also very interesting because during that time I had a lot of work to do because you're working kind of from 9 to 11 because you have the Indian part, you have the British part. When do you talk to them? When do they talk to you? You know, it's like a lot of coordinating in that. So I did that for about 4 years. And in that company, I actually won them an award. So they had something called iHub IoT. They were an Internet of Things company. And I wrote, and they had a contract for the government to deploy Internet of Things into various like colleges and companies. So their first deployment, they needed a REST API and they didn't have one. So the auditor came because we were being checked by the government and they said, well, look, in order for you guys to get your check, you have to have this stuff done. This was in August and the stuff was due in October. So how many months is that? August, September, October, bam. Okay, they're like, okay, Barb, who's gonna write this? And then my colleague and kind of boss at the time, he's like, all right. I said, you don't have time to write that. You know, you're not gonna even write that. So I'll write it. And then the person that was supposed to write it didn't want to write it either. So I said, well, I'm not even supposed to be on this project, honestly. So I'll just write it. So 2 months later, REST API comes out. We win a Gardner-Quill vendor award. The deployment was flawless. I think they found one problem in it and I fixed it. And it was a very minor problem because somebody actually put in like 26,000 requests in a minute. And I was like, well, that's not good. I'll rate limit this. but it didn't fall over. So, hey, that was a claim to fame. So after that kind of ended, that was 2014, 2015, popped out of the hole. I said, well, you know what? I can't be a VP of engineering anymore. I might as well now be a CTO. So I popped out and said, hey, everybody, I'm a CTO now. And it's funny, I went to start networking back in some of my groups, and everyone's like, I said, hey, they were like, hey, Barb, what were you up to? I said, well, I'm doing this CTO thing. And they went, you know how to code? What? Because when you have the CEO moniker, which I had at TechGeni and these other things, like they don't think you came from a computer background. They had no clue. So, of course I'm not going to have, technical person on myself. I have CEO because I want you to take me as that. So that's why at Trailyn, I have CTO as my moniker. I am the CEO as well, but it's like, I want to make it clear, like I'm very technical. So you're talking to the technical person as well.
So what do you guys, Trailyn? Focus on that.
So like that, so like I became a CTO, and that kind of goes into Trailyn. So Trailyn is my blockchain advisory company. We kind of put companies on blockchains. We actually work with AI, AR, and IoT. We work with all the emerging tech actually. So we help companies innovate on those areas. What about Trailyn? I mean, we have private clients. I think Trailyn's going to morph a little bit because, a lot of people need other types of technical help and strategic level technical help. And the other hat I wear at WIFAX, and we'll talk about how that trajectory came as well, I can help apply some of that into startups. And I had been doing that prior to starting WIFAX, the fund. I'd always help companies raise money. I'd always help companies with their pitches. I'd always help companies with their business strategy. How do you make revenues? How do you make money? What is your monetization? Because as a technical person, you have to understand, like, how is that now going to be implemented into your software? Now you can just do Stripe, easy. But what if you want to put something else in there? Cryptocurrency, or what if you want to do PayPal, or what if you want to do Braintree or Amazon or other, other payment mechanisms. So, or are you just going to be a normal B2B? And then I don't have to worry about it. You're going to do a traditional, like send an invoice. But even that can be done by a computer now. So the question becomes, from a technical side, what do we need to put in here to make it monetizable? What are the revenue models that impact the technology? And then how can we make that scale? So a lot of people never understood this, like, why is this important? It's important because how are we making money here? You're not gonna, if you're gonna kind of give up things for free, nowadays you have to look at the scale of that, what that has to be, 1 million people, 2 million people, for it to be interesting for anybody. Whereas if you have, 10,000 good people pay you every month, that's a good thing. So you have to look at it that way. So that's what I look at.
I think one of the things you're touching on is common in tech is where you have developer-led project versus like an entrepreneur-led project, where they kind of see different things. A lot of tech people, they just want to build, but I always come at things, and I'm not a developer. But what I always kind of see is, find a customer first and then build a solution to their problem. And do that first. Right. And I find when I started looking at businesses from that perspective, instead of just building something I had in my head, now that can work, but you got to do a lot of diligence and validation before you move forward on that. But I think, there are a lot of developer-led projects that don't understand revenue, don't understand business development in markets and things like that. And I think that's important that you as a VC understand the tech side really heavily, but you also understand, the business
side.
You're like the Lee Iacocca of like, tech, right?
Lee Iacocca was so awesome.
Well, a lot of people don't understand. He was heavily involved with product development and engineering, and I think he actually was an engineer at one point. And then that's when he developed the marketing developed the Mustang project, and then later, went to Chrysler and built all those products. But he was one of those rare people that can make that transition from the tech side to the actual business and leadership side, because that's rare. And it's interesting that you have done that.
I've always been interested in business. And I always said I would have a company, even when I was young. a young person. You know, like the technology thing just kind of fell, like I just kind of fell into it. Actually, it just became the thing that I naturally was excellent to do at, and I was blessed to find that very early. But I was always interested and fascinated by business, and from a technology side, from a technical person side, if you think about systems and how systems work and how things flow, like business is like an ultimate kind of systems level view of life, because it's kind of like, how do these things work? What happens if you have to pivot? You know, we have the global pandemic, because I do call it the global pandemic. You know, how, you know, all systems are shifting. So how do you strategically pivot or move that or change it? And I think like my natural ability to architect and design systems is kind of utilized when you look at things from a business perspective and go, okay, you can architect and design things in your business just like you would from a software or a product side as well, in my mind. So to me, there's kind of, you know, it's not really that different, but I agree with you. I think sometimes, you know, tech people are very tech heavy, business people are very business heavy, but that's why you need those alliances. That's why you really need kind of to build an advisory board, a mastermind, you know, have other people kind of around you. And so you can get the advice of, look, you know, I'm building this, like, is there a market for this? Do I have competition? No, I don't have any competition. You always have competition. The way it's done now is competition. So, you know, hey, so I mean, you know, this is why bringing the business people and the tech people together is very powerful.
I think so as well. So I won't ask that one question, but you are involved in emerging technologies.
I am. I'm in all of them, actually.
So why focus on the emerging technologies versus more traditional programming and, you know, consulting models?
In the emerging tech world, well, okay, let's take it pre-pandemic and then post-pandemic. So if you look at what's happened before the global pandemic, what shifts were going on? You know, we're in the U.S. here, so I don't know how global your podcast is, Rob, but the thing about it is, if you think about it, we were talking about like voting. There's a lot of conversations around voting. So why is voting not on some emerging tech platform where you could validate who you are, you have a slate of people, and then you go, okay, I vote for this slate of people or whatever, you check 1111 on a computer, on your phone, wherever, and then you submit it and you know it's you because they validated it was you. Huh? Okay, does that sound, technically, that's not a hard problem to solve, but some of this is really political will. So now if you look at post-pandemic, I know many countries have had stimulus. Now, I also know many countries were clearly more prepared for stimulus than the United States. So if you think about that distribution of money or distribution period, it could be distribution of food. We had, you know, shortages of toilet paper. Why was that? We had shortages of other things. Why was that? These are distribution problems. If you look at that, like some of this could have been tracked and traced on these emerging techs. And AI could have told you like, hey, you're running out of toilet paper and you only have like 2 weeks of toilet paper in the pipe. You might need to go order 15 or 20 weeks of toilet paper. Now, the AI also could have said the global supply of toilet paper is only 5 weeks. So for everyone on the planet, it's only 5 weeks of toilet paper. Something could have told us that. But, you know, if you would have done a more traditional system, how would you have found that out? Who are you going to call? Who's going to call you back? How are you going to know? It's all centralized. So the one with all the toilet paper, and we had people that did this. Oh, I bought all this hand sanitizer and I bought all this stuff. We had people that were hoarding. So if you're hoarding, they were hoarding masks. How were we going to find that out? It was going to be impossible. That's why I work in the emerging tech field, to actually solve problems at scale. Because all these things are going to be all infrastructure. AI is already pretty ubiquitous. People ask me about AI all the time. What about AI? You know, if you go to McDonald's or Starbucks, I don't know if you go to McDonald's, I don't really go there, but I found this out, like when you go to most of these restaurants now and you order, you're really talking to an AI. You're not talking to a person. And then you're talking to the AI, and then sometimes they go, oh, hold on. And then you hear a person interrupt.
Right.
That is, the AI has said, hey, I don't understand their order, or I don't understand something. And then the person interrupts. So AI is very ubiquitous. When you call the bank, which is annoying, or anything now, the electric, anything. If you call anything, I called the phone weave. That's an AI. The AI is like, I don't understand. I don't understand. I'm like pressing 0, 0, 0. Can I get to a person? No, it won't let you. Yes, it's like, hello, hello. So, I mean, if you think about these emerging techs, they're going to be all infrastructure. And so why don't you want to be in kind of the next generation of what's happening? Because, you know, post-pandemic has proven a lot of things. What's really going to be necessary and what is not, and what skill sets are going to be necessary and what is not.
I think
that's a whole nother conversation. That's like a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, I think politics is a big deal, and I think that definitely permeates, you know, a lot of different things. And I mean, we could unpack, you know, things like the global pandemic, and from the political side of it, which it's been politicized and poisoned throughout, you know, all levels of government and stuff. And my wife's a medical doctor who, you know, works kind of with the federal government, and so trust me, we view the pandemic probably differently than a lot of people do, but we definitely are concerned, and it definitely is a problem, and it's a problem that can't, and it's a problem that's solvable. And yeah, and you know, it's like we seem to, the United States, it's like we certainly have had a hard time, you know, coming together as a people. I think that's part of the problem, is that you look at the countries that have done the best at, like New Zealand, which is virus free now,
or Sweden, another one,
where they've come together and they viewed it, you know, they viewed it as the country versus the virus, and here it's the one side of the political aisle versus the other versus the virus. So and that's the problem. And I think ultimately, you know, I think those of us who think in terms of actual you know, solving problems and not politics, it's hard for us to, like, you know, it's a
head scratcher.
It's definitely a head scratcher.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's pivot a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about WIFAX and what you're doing with your accelerator with women in tech. What's that all about?
All right, so WIFAX, you know, it's called the Women's Innovation Fund Accelerator. So the women portion of WIFAX is that we like gender balanced C-level. So we like an equal amount of men and women. You can have a few more women than men. We do have a few people that are all women. But that's where we do have one set that's all men. That's like super rare. We usually don't take those people. I kind of knew that person, so they got in, but we like the balance, and I'll tell you why in a minute. The innovation, emerging tech, and sustainability. So we do the blockchain, AI, AR, IoT, and they will also help the companies become sustainable companies, because we believe those are your next set of consumers. You know, a lot of younger people, younger than us, I think, like the sustainability aspect. They like that you're corporately responsible, environmentally responsible, socially responsible. So we kind of help the companies become that in the accelerator. We're a fund, we're an opportunity zone impact fund. So we're very localized. We're about creating jobs, giving opportunity to underserved, underrepresented people. That could be women, that could be Black and brown, that could be any kind of underrepresented people. And then we're an accelerator. So our accelerator does two things. We help your company become fundable, and we make you sustainable. So our fundability quotient is we run this thing called the due diligence intensive. So I have a very rigorous due diligence package, and it's 6 weeks. So we go through this checklist, which is 6 pages. The back part of what I have to do is a lot more pages. If you're a blockchain company, it's even extra pages. It's like, it goes between 28 and 35 pages that I have to do to validate, like, you're a real company, this is a real thing, you know, and you get feedback on that. And then it's 2 weeks of sustainability. So they get a 1-year sustainability plan, which we track internal to our fund. So that's what's very different about our fund. we're not really a traditional, I mean, we are a venture fund, we're traditional in that way, we like the traditional venture returns, but we're also very community oriented, very socially oriented. We like to work with people that want to scale big, global. We're global reach as well. We have partners in Korea. I have people on our board that help us get over into Asia and Korea. So, we're knocking that around. So that's us in a nutshell. So we absolutely feel the need to support women in STEM and STEAM. I mean, I've been in STEM and STEAM my whole life. It's important, even not from a technological side, to be in it, because most companies are tech enabled, but you need somebody that understands that. Like, hey, are you going to be the Facebook where you need heavy tech? Or are you going to be something else where it's tech enabled? So, there's that as well. And then then you have your business wrappings as well. How are you going to monetize? How are you going to get customers? How are you going to grow? How are you going to pivot? How are you going to, so there's a lot to business and a lot to running a fund, because then we have our portfolio construction. How are we getting everyone to play together? Then you have your, co-investors, and you have your investors. There's many things to running a fund.
I can imagine. How many portfolio companies do you have now?
So we have we have 4 portfolio companies that we put powder into, and we've done 17 companies in acceleration.
Wow, that's good. So are you focused mainly through your accelerator on seed stage, or are you looking? How many stages do you want to go to, and are you looking to grow your fund as well to later stage kind of companies?
You know what? I think we're probably like late seed, early Series A. So that's kind of where we want to play. I think later stage, there are a lot of people that can, now you're competing with like Andreessen Horowitz's and, or like Early's fund and many, you're dealing with like a lot of other more mature funds at that stage. I still think that for women, there is a gap between seed and B, like seed and B. So we are in our fund, we are doing follow-on money. So like if you get an A and we do the A with someone, then we're willing to do the B and be a part of that. And then I think if you get at that level, so we're talking about 50, 60, 70, $100 million revenue level-ish, then, you should be able to get either out or kind of, up to the next levels. The other thing that we do here is we have something called a capital stack program, and we're testing it on ourselves, not ourselves, but on some of the portfolio companies. And what that is we look at how do you exit and then roll back. So what do we need to do to potentially get you to exit? Because the IPO market is frothy. Like private companies are taking longer and longer to come out, 9 years, 10 years, 12 years. That's a long time if you're sitting there at the seed or A level. That's a long time to wait. So we say, okay, how can we configure it so that you can potentially, be attractive for an exit, which could be an acquisition, you're acquiring, they're acquiring. So that's how we see exits as well. So that's kind of how we're working it. So far it's working well.
So if you had a project that wanted to come to you, but they don't have a woman, do you have people in a stable that you can put on teams?
Yes. We absolutely do. It depends on what the configuration is, but yes, we can put women on teams. Absolutely.
So I really like what you're doing, and it's kind of funny. My wife and I are big believers in STEM, and we actually homeschool our kids. And awesome. we have 2 daughters, and the reason we homeschool primarily, and it's not for religious reasons, which is pretty common among homeschoolers, but we wanted to ensure that our daughters and our sons, but all our kids, got a really strong STEM education. So our oldest daughter is 17, and she's going toward chem engineering, but she's finishing up her sophomore year of college at 17, and so her. Yeah, so she's doing.
I get that.
And so she's doing all, but it's interesting because all our kids are a couple of years ahead of where they would be in public school. It's just homeschool is just so much more efficient at getting kids through. And we found that STEM is, it's one of the things that I'm concerned about the United States long term is culturally,
Absolutely.
we don't value education as a country anymore. And I'm not sure we did for a long time either, but I think we're beginning to become less competitive as a country going forward.
I agree.
And a lot of that's STEM. And I think a lot of the problems you're seeing with all the people, you see a lot of people like Zoomers and millennials that are struggling. And a lot of that goes back to, I think, a bad education model that we have in the United States. And I'm not trying to get political, right? But I do my best to stay out.
This is just factual. I mean, we're talking about facts here. This is not a political statement. I mean, education, it cuts across everything and everyone, actually.
And one of the things that I see as a problem with education, and I think this affects girls too, so I think this is important, is that we don't focus on, in the United States, in our public school systems, pretty much anywhere. We do not focus on science and education, and we don't train kids to mastery. We just push them through the system. And one of the things that we do different with our education, our values, we tell our kids, look, it takes as long as it takes for you to master this. However, you don't go to the next level until you master it. We will give you all the tools that you need, including hiring tutors or what have you, to get you to that mastery. But we don't let our kids go to the next level of whatever subject
it may be,
unless they're mastering it, meaning that they basically get an A, And when I tell people this, that are my friends that have their kids in public school, they're like, wow, that's so mean, that's so hard. And I'm like, why would you progress somebody who's failing at something or just mediocre at something? Because things only typically get harder as you go forward. And if you're not having a good grasp of basics, you're going to struggle. And so it's interesting. And it's interesting in the United States. On top of that, with public school, you have so many people, because of the way we do student loans and stuff, you had a lot of bad advice given to kids, I think. Is like they take on so much debt. And
a ton of debt.
But
and
they
no
also
marketable skills.
But they take on a lot of debt for no ROI. And so it's interesting. So, I mean, we've had a lot of arguments and time and discussions, especially with my older kid. But she came around eventually. But we said, look, if we're going to pay for your education, now I think paying for an education is part of being a good parent. I think we owe that
100%.
Now that doesn't have to be a college degree, but we think that if you're going to move forward, your kid has to have enough life skills to be independent at 18. Like they know how to drive a car, they know how to change a tire, they know how to do laundry, cook,
budget, blah, blah,
all
blah,
those
blah.
things.
Yep.
And work and make money and make good business decisions and good buying decisions. I mean, we have a very holistic approach. And at 18, my kids need to do these things because those things are important. And so I think what's happened is you have all these people that for so long, they just I'm going to go spend $100,000 to get this education that starting pay is like $16 an hour. And my one daughter, she's had to work hard to get where she's getting with her grades in school because STEM is hard. Okay, you have to do 4 levels of calculus for an engineering degree.
Absolutely,
but
especially Kimmy.
and what we said is, but I said, and right now it's it's kind of a joke. I have an MBA, and I also wanted to learn to be a welder because I like to make metal art. That's my hobby.
Interesting.
And last summer, a year ago, I graduated from a 1.5 year long full-blown welding program. I'm a certified welder now.
Good for you.
I went to school full-time for a 1.5 years to become a hobby welder. It's kind of funny, but I'm a full welder. And it was hard actually, because I don't have great hand-eye coordination, but I learned to weld. And it's interesting because I got to be around a lot of kids that were half my age. I was the oldest guy in my class, and I was older than my instructor. And, but a lot of these guys are blue-collar kids, but these kids are coming out of welding school. So it was a nighttime program, 4 nights a week.
Right.
So blue collar, it's blue collar as it gets, but I respect people that work with their hands. But the interesting thing is this program from start to finish was less than over 1.5 years, and you paid it in payments, $6,000. So that's the cost of the education, but maybe $6,500 by the time you buy your welding helmet and all the gear, but about $6,000 is what it was. And you could work during the day. It was designed for people that had a day job. So you're 18 years old, By the time you're 19, you can have the certification, have a skill.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to not work while you're going to school because you can go at night. Now, here's the interesting. They're so desperate for welders in the United States right now. This was interesting, and I was shocked. They had major corporations that are major industrial corporations coming to our welding program,
Wow.
trying to recruit us halfway through to start work during the day, starting at $30,000 a year, or more, up to 30 to 40K. So it was like $15 to $20 an hour, plus full benefits.
Well, plus everything else.
401k matching.
Yeah.
Healthcare, you name it. I mean, all major typical corporate benefits packages, paid vacation, boot allowance, you name it. And I'm just like, oh my God. So think about this. And I tried to explain this to my kid when she's like wanting to look at a different lesser major that didn't have a good ROI. And I said, look, we can pay whatever it's going to be for you to go to the college and get this degree, $30,000, $40,000, whatever it ends up being. And then you make 40 grand a year with this type of major that she was interested in. And I said, look, that's not worth the money.
Right.
I would rather you go to welding school. Or, they were posting at the school for electronics technicians for a 2-year degree to be just an electronic repair, started at $56,000 a year. With a 2-year, basically an associate degree from a community college, people were starting. The local rail yard is starting at people at $35,000 a year with no experience to work in the rail industry. And just now these are more hands-on blue collar jobs, but
but I mean, these are all these are all interesting things because you still need some technical ability. You still need to do math. You can't weld just wherever. You still need some type of creativity and thinking. Like you're still going to have to measure. So you're going to have to know some math. You know what I'm saying? Like, so, because we're talking about STEM and STEAM. And I think from a technology perspective, no matter what it is, you have to have that. You may not have to have the science unless you want to do that heavy science like biology, or you're solving the problem for COVID-19, you're trying to make a vaccine. You clearly need science for that. But the technology and the math part, I mean, as long as you're a lifelong learner and you're really good at what you do and you really understand how systems work and things work, I mean, I don't believe you have to have a traditional education. I mean, back in the day, we had to have a traditional education because we didn't have the choice to do a traditional, non-traditional. We can go on, now, if you think about it, even prior to everything happening, you could go online and learn anything. Like they had Udemy, they had
Khan Academy.
Khan Academy. They had like Berkeley and Stanford and all the other people had opened up their edX platform, and you could go on to anything. So, and you could learn anything. So it's not necessarily about where you learn it. It's about, are you learning? And then how do you then apply it? And I agree with you on mastery, because in this computer science world that I've been in a long time, mastery is important, because you could really, I worked for a pacemaker company, and that was interesting. But you don't have any mastery of what's going on there, you're going to kill somebody. So, there are things where if you don't have mastery, it can really hurt people in a bad way, in a negative way. And so I like what you said about that. And I think that we have gotten away from that mastery. And, even in your own craft, are you a master in your own craft? But if you think about education, which kind of started this conversation off, education has gotten completely failed. I've met multiple people from multiple colleges trying to get a job in the computer world, and they had peace and freedom degree. I don't even know what that is. Like, what was the peace and freedom? Like, and I don't know how that relates to computers. And I don't, you got a degree from Berkeley, but that's a worthless piece of paper. So I agree. Like, you spend a lot of money on nothing. And now you have to go get some PhD in peace and freedom. I don't even know how that works or what you're going to do. But it's kind of like, did you not think of this? Did your parents not have a conversation with you? Were you being rebellious and said, I'm gonna go get a peace and freedom degree? And they said, no, you should really be this other, like, you know, that, and then like, did the school counselor really like say, hey, this is a good idea? Yeah, you're down for peace and freedom. Like, it doesn't make, some of these actual offerings of degrees make no sense.
and you get in a lot of debt. And I guess that was my long-winded tale, is that you can get a very worthwhile, high ROI education making good money without having to take off any time. And with at 19 years old, you can make enough money with no debt. So you can work your way through like I guess a whole lot of different type of, you know,
it could be many things,
you know, a lot of things, and not have any debt
with minimal debt,
and have completely self-sustainable by the time you're 20. Where you're, if you're making 40 grand a year and you're 20, you could easily live on your own. If you if you have decent money management skills in Utah, you could rent your own apartment, have a new car, and live on that. Absolutely. And so, and what I see right now is so many people are in debt for these degrees that have no skills. There's no ROI, and it's like, it came down to me. It's like, it seems like no parent had that conversation about, does this make sense
conversation
to take 5 years of your life to get this degree where you can't work? And I'm like, okay, well, you can go to welding school at night and never take off and lose any opportunity cost for working for 5 years, work your way through, pay as you go. And now you're self-sufficient at 19. But then, you know, and I was talking to, like, even in welding, that there's a track to be a weld inspector and then an expert witness and all these other things. And you can be a welding engineer. They do have bachelor's degrees in welding engineer. So if you decide to
keep going,
so you could be an entrepreneur welders. Like
absolutely.
An entrepreneur welder can make 60, 80 bucks an hour if you have a weld shop. And then if you are a mobile welder where you,
I mean, there's many different things.
There's all sorts.
This is the business side of your actual like creativity. So like, I kind of took my tech side and became, you know, and created a business around that. And same with a fund. I mean, a fund is kind of like a business on steroids, but still a business. Still need ROI. You still have to answer investors. You still have to make, you know, decisions. You still have strategy. You still have, you know, a lot of things to do.
But it opens the door to make it so young people have a way to have a very successful life at a young age and still have lots of options. And no one talks about that. You know,
well,
schools
you know who's actually very famous for this is Mike Rowe. You know,
yes, Dirty Jobs.
You know, the Dirty Jobs. Yeah, he's very, very famous for, you know, hey, if you're a welder, if you're a plumber, if you're, you know, the railroad guy, I mean, sanitation people, I memean, and they make decent money. They make decent money. And like you said, 19-year-old, you're making 40 to 50 grand. I mean, that's decent money.
It's great. In Utah, that's amazing money. And so,
I mean,
you know,
that's
it's
decent
funny.
money in general. I mean, if you even in LA, that's decent money. That's kind of above what everyone else making.
And you want to hear something interesting? It's like, there was like one girl in my welding program, and like she was recruited out at like twice the rate of what any of the guys, because just like any other corporation right now, if you're a woman or a minority, they do have preferential hiring because they're trying to fill slots as well. All these big woke companies, right? They want minorities, they want women, they can't get them to apply. And it was just really,
I think, you know, back to the education piece. I think that's partially education as well, because one of my very good friends has a daughter. She has 2 daughters, and she decided that her daughter needed to be opted out of math. And I said, don't let them record that on her record. Don't do that, because then you'll always be labeled as you can't do math, right? I said, well, look, get her a tutor. I said, we'll have some other people tutor. I said, don't have her labeled as that. But I think that this happens a lot, where girls are discouraged from doing the math and the science and the hard thing, and encouraged, even still to this day, because this is not, you know, she's out of college, but it still was in the last, I'd say, 5 or 6 years, which isn't so long ago, where girls are discouraged, and it's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, we have to, as women and moms and aunts and grandmas and all those things, have to stand up and go, look, we cannot allow our girls, younger girls, to go through all these same things we went through, or we're the pioneers. So we're going to try and pave a way and make it easier for them. And so this is why WIFAX kind of exists. And this is why we're doing the balance. We're doing the balance because we said, look, women are, the statistics are there, 2% funding, all women, insane. And, underrepresented founders, even less, insane. So, we're not as representative in all the tech spaces, in the STEM and STEAM, insane. That's why we're doing the innovation. That's why we do the emerging tech, is so that we can be a part of the next generation economy. And then, just like welders, you're going to need engineers, you're going to need scientists, you're going to need, you're going to need the welder to build the quantum computer. So, hey, you got to have that happening. And the drones, you need the welder to build the drones, but then you need somebody to code the drones and program the drones. So there's all these things that can be going on in synergy and in an ecosystem way, that all these things can play together. But then who's looking at that? Who's thinking about that? We're talking about it now, and we're thinking about it clearly, but these are highly strategic things that you have to be thinking about. And so we talk about in our fund, we were trying to create the next generation workforce, which is all the STEM and STEAM, all these advanced tech, because this is only going to come further and further. And we're concerned about AI replacing us. Well, what are these people going to do? Well, they can weld, they can do other things. There's other things you can do, and then they can be a part of the ecosystem. But then we can also train them to create the AIs, create the data for the AIs, maintain the AIs. There's a lot of things you can train people to do. Next generation workforce, next generation entrepreneur. So we're trying to get the next set of people to create the next set of companies, whatever those are. And then we're trying to do the next generation investor. So if you're not powdering the people that are going to invest in the next set of people because they're successful, then what are you doing?
No idea. I think what I'd like to see is, we create more role models, about women, girls getting STEM. Now, I think, a lot of this, and I think you probably know this too, there's a lot of cultural bias against women being successful and independent in certain circles. Yes. Certain religions and certain cultures are very male dominated. And, even the state I live in Utah, there's still the man is in charge. And I can get into different, I could call out lots of different groups, but a lot of Orthodox groups don't want women learning anything. And I think, so there are a lot of other cultural things that I think keep girls from learning things and discouraging. And all I can say is I like to see more role models about what you're doing. And I'm living it with my own kids. I want my girls to not, so I think, to me, I want my kids to be absolutely successful, and I want my kids to never have to be dependent or stuck in a situation where they can't make a living on themselves. If they want to be a stay-at-home mom with an engineering degree, that's great. That's a choice. Even with my wife, after medical school, my wife, we had to stay home for a couple of years before she went on to her career after she graduated from medical school, because we had one of our kids was very sick. And so, but to me, I had no less respect for my wife, and, when she was, being a stay-at-home mom, and we changed our life based on that. And so to me, that's how I view it, is I want my kids to have more options in life. And even think about it like this, right? As a father, and you have kids, right?
I do. I have one son, actually.
You want the best for your kid, right?
Absolutely.
And to me,
100%.
let's just be honest, right? A son who is a good earner and successful has a much better chance at having, let's just say, for lack of a better word, options when it comes to finding a spouse or a wife or, what have you, going forward, because they're a more attractive person. A better earner in this society is more likely to have more options. And I think it's the same with a girl, and to me, it's
Absolutely.
like, there's some guys that don't, there's still some cavemen kind of guys that don't want a smart wife. I disagree. I married up. I'm first to say I was blessed that I married way out of my league, and you know what, it's been very good for us. And I think I've learned a lot from my wife, and I have a different perspective. So I'm more of a hands-on problem solver. So my wife and I really balance. We just had our 20th anniversary too. So it's working out so far. Thank you.
Awesome. Wonderful.
And so to me, it's like, I just want those options. And I wish that there were more role models out there showing that,
I think girls have a lot more options, and just to, since I'm kind of in this, in that space, in the space of diversity, in the space of diversity and inclusion, in the space of women. I mean, I've talked to many women globally, like worldwide. And I think that the women are changing it for the women. And so I agree with you. Culturally, there's still some, things. And when we talk about things in a systemic way, when I say that's just a systemic, it's complacency. It's the fact that you're allowing it to go on and on and on and on continuously until the end of time. That's to me what something systemic is. It's not, that it's a system and it's against you. No, the systemic part is complacency. The fact that no one does anything, everyone knows, no one says anything, no one does anything. That creates problems. That creates a systemic problem, period, whatever you want to label the problem as. But I say that to say this, I think that, globally, women are really moving forward in many aspects, and it's just not seen. And I think, like, do you have to, role models are powerful and they're important, but you have to ask yourself, like, who are these role models? So like when I saw the Hidden Figures, I actually knew somebody who was related to one of the Hidden Figures, but like, who knew about that? Like, I didn't know. Like, so the other part of it is to surface these people and these pioneers and these women that have done so many things, and show, like, hey, you have no limitation. Like I've never felt like personally I've ever had a limitation as to what I could do or not do. And I think sometimes we put limitations on ourselves, but I've never felt that. My parents never told me, like, hey, you're limited because of X, Y, Z, ABC. Like that was never a conversation in the house. Where I don't have that conversation with my son. I'd say, man, you got unlimited, what have you. Well, Mom, I was afraid. I said, I don't know why. I mean, I didn't do this. So like, what made you think I was going to be different? So I think, like, really it's your mindset and your limiting of yourself in the end. And, I have friends with lots of daughters, and I said they can be unlimited, but really it's a factor of the parents. I think your daughters will be unlimited because you guys, from our conversation, you're very supportive, very loving. They're going to see, like, what is a real family? What is a mom and a dad? How does that really work? And I think, like, they're going to have no limitations, because a part of it is just being clear on yourself and not being afraid of your capability. I think a lot of women are afraid of capability. I hear about this imposter syndrome. People said, have you had that? I'm like, no, I don't even know what that is. Like, you just do it. I'm an entrepreneur in the end. Like, I mean, you got to get over stuff. Like, stuff happens, you fail, you get, things happen, you fail, stuff doesn't work out. Okay, next. That's entrepreneur.
Well, and I
that's
think
the difference in my mind.
But I also think that's part of the problem with our country with entrepreneurs. And it's even worse in places like Europe, where they really don't like entrepreneurs, which is interesting.
Yes,
even
that's
here,
different. Yes.
I always tell, I think we get into, man, we got to have another conversation, actually.
Awesome. We will.
We will. But I definitely think that we don't even, at least through public schools, we don't teach things that are important, like financial literacy or entrepreneurship. And I think part of the problem is that you have teachers that are financially illiterate and they're not entrepreneurs. So they don't understand those things. Even with my welding program, I know I keep going back to that, but I learned a lot. I actually learned a lot.
I'm going to counteract your point there, because I have been in some schools, and schools are starting. It depends on where you are. And it really depends on the superintendent, or like really the head top person of the school. Because I've been in a couple of school districts where they were really trying to teach the kids entrepreneurship, expose them to entrepreneurship. A few years ago, I was mentoring some kids. 2010, I was mentoring some kids, and man, kids have some amazing ideas, and they take, like, hey, I'm going to babysit, and then I'm going to hire my friends to babysit. And I said, well, is it just you going to be babysitting? No, and I'm going to charge this, and then I'm going to only take so many babies. And I was like, wow, these kids have so many. But I mean, or like somebody was trying to sell candy on campus because they had this candy because their parents were making this candy. I mean, it's amazing. Kids have amazing ideas. The thing that we need to do as adults is go, well, look, these are amazing ideas, and support them in their ideas, because they're already afraid, because you're like this adult, and they think, oh, you're this adult and they're not going to take me seriously. But it doesn't mean you're not serious. It just means that maybe you need a little bit of boost and a little bit of confidence boost and like, hey, this is just as good as idea as anybody else got. The real question is, what are you going to do about it now?
They're going to call you.
Hopefully they'll call
So,
me.
Barbara, where can people find out more about you?
So you can find out more about me on a couple of places. If you go to www.wifaxvc.com, that's one place. That's the fund. And then if you want to know about Trailyn, you go to www.trailyn.com. That's my blockchain advisory. Find out plenty about me there. All my social media is there. So I'm on all the social media: LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter. I'm on everything.
Barbara, I've had a really good time today, and I do appreciate
so
coming on the
much.
show. Hey, folks, this is Rob McNealy. Make sure you check us out on the web at robmcnealy.com and hit that subscribe button, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you for listening to the Rob McNealy program. Make sure you check us out on the web at robmcnealy.com and subscribe to our podcast at YouTube, iTunes, and on the Google Play Store.